Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I kept having this vision this week. Join me in this vision, because you'll notice that it's a little scary, this vision, where I was in a small airplane, like a two-seater airplane. What are those called? Those
Puddle jumpers?
A puddle jumper. And I went to go get into this plane, which seemed rather kind of old and sturdy, but efficient, like efficiency, right? And I go to get in thinking I got all of this together and I'm going to just go into this plane and life's going to be great. And I actually find that there's somebody else in the pilot's seat. And that person says, "No sweat, just come on in, sit down, I got this. I got you, we're good." And so here I turn to this person in the plane and I find out actually it's God. God. And for the first time in a really, really long time, I was like, wait a second, hold on. Like, if God's actually cruising this plane, what do I have to do? And then I started asking myself, well, what is actually the role of the copilot? What does a copilot actually do? Does the copilot just sit there and go, oh yeah, the little dials look really cool, we got enough gas, and hey, I think you're going up high enough and fast enough. And all of a sudden I realized that actually the copilot probably doesn't do anything but say, can I get you some water now? Do you have to go to the bathroom? Can I relieve you while you're doing that? Oh, you're going to put it on autopilot. And then I started pondering my experience in the larger world. I'm wondering how much control really do I have? What is the relationship that I have with trust? What is the relationship that I have with God? What is the relationship that I have with faith? And how powerful or powerless am I really as a being? And if I sit here and say, I believe that God is omnipresent and omniscient, then how do I engage the world? Straight up, guys, I had no idea I was going to share that. And I'm glad I did, because what was really on my mind was some leftovers from last week's talk, when Tom talked about celebrating our differences. And for those of you who weren't here, at the end of that experience, at the end of his talk, he had us do an experience where we stood up and we had to go to different people and we had to tell that other person what we were different about. And we had to say something like, this is my memory, I'm celebrating the differences of you because you're a guy, and I like that. It was pretty much, is that how that was? Good enough, okay. And as we were moving through people, my experience was that became a little difficult for people to celebrate differences. And that was part of where God was the pilot, and I was part of the co-pilot. So there became the name of this because Beverly asked me for it on Tuesday. It's too early in the week. God hadn't talked yet. And I'm supposed to have this work. Do I have to point it like a special spot? Oh. So that's okay, so what happened as I was sitting with that is I began to understand that in order for us to feel really comfortable celebrating our differences, we had to really be comfortable with knowing our own differences. And that, in fact, it's a relationship with ourselves to figure out all the barriers that we have created against our own love. And at that point, I want you to understand I'm totally in the co-pilot seat. And I have no idea where God was driving this whole week. So that's probably why we're all here together. Our task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. That's a really difficult thing to do, right? It means that we have to have time and take time to really be contemplative and to settle into examining who we are. And that then led me to an interesting search. I went to the Bible because I was curious, and I came up with so many different quotes, 2 pages of them, just on a quick search of permission in the Bible to examine ourselves. Psalm 77:6. I will remember my song in the night. I will meditate with my heart, and my spirit ponders. Lamentations. Now, who really ever thought of that one? Like, that doesn't even sound inviting, does it? But lamentation, sorry, and lamenting. You like that? That was good, right? Okay. So in our lamenting of my mispronunciation, how about let us examine and probe our ways, and let us return to the Lord. And from, I think it's, I'm kind of a little nervous, Haggai, thank you. Now, therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much, but harvest little. You eat, but there is not enough to be satisfied. You drink, but there is not enough to become drunk. You put on clothing, but no one is warm enough. And he who earns wages to put into a purse with holes. Thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Isn't that amazing? That was like my favorite one. So he was a prophet from Hebrews. And what I loved about that was the vision of the purse with the holes. Like, who wants that? I surely don't. And so it brought me back to this quote, which Tom pointed out he used last week. So we must have been in similar brains because I came upon it all by myself this week. Right here and now, the great work of character building is to be done. So this came from the 12 Powers of Man, so we know that this was in the 1940s, right? Right now, though, in 2018, the great work of character building is to be done. Pulling right away from the kingdom of heaven within himself. I don't know about you guys, but the spiral of self-discovery is sometimes really painful. And it's really painful to be able to recognize our sins or when we're missing the mark, right? And it's really difficult to be that vulnerable to say, this is a part of me that may not be so attractive, but I love it anyways. And in order for us to actually live that commandment about loving our neighbors as ourselves, we actually have to show up and love ourselves. And as it was pointed out last week, sometimes it's easier to be vulnerable with people we don't know than it is to be vulnerable with people that we do know. We still have that fear of what are they going to see maybe in our character. Or maybe it's what am I going to see if I'm vulnerable. Any of you guys ever hear of Johari's window? Is that something? No? So there were these 2 guys, John and Harry, and they were psychologists, and in 1950s, it's on my notes, they got together and they developed this way of beginning to know each other. Now, I'm not the queen of PowerPoints, but I had listened to your feedback in the past and heard I needed to have bigger things, so I hope this is big enough for you. Over here in this square, this arena here, this is shared by things that I know as a person and things that are known by others. This square are things I don't know and are known by others. So that's our blind side. That's where we can discover parts of ourselves This here is unknown by others, but I know. So we hide that part of ourselves from others. And over here, this is an unknown piece yet to be discovered. So it's unknown by others and unknown by ourselves. So let's focus for a second on this arena section over here. This arena over here is like the public arena. It's the stuff that we all know about each other. In here in community, we might know who the veterans were because they all stood up today. We might know whose birthday we just celebrated in the beginning of November. We might know who does herbs. We might know who is our prayer ministry. We might know all these things, and they're also for public knowledge. We can go on Facebook, we can see these things. There's not a lot of fear in disclosure. That's what I'm getting to, right? This is our safe zone of where we can share information. When we come over here, well, I don't want to do that one yet. I want to do this one. I know, but is unknown by others. These are the parts that maybe we don't share so quickly. These might be parts of our journey in the past, or some burdens that we might be carrying in our heart, or they might be some things that we've celebrated but we don't want to talk about those because we wouldn't want to be having too much bravado. Or it might be any part of us that we're not sharing, that we keep as that barrier to other people, okay? And then over here in this unknown, so I've worked on this with clients who I've seen and worked with who have addiction. And it was really interesting when I was introducing this to them, and we were talking about this unknown part. Do you know that every single person thought that that was the worst square up there? Right? But it invites us to be curious in a way, right? Gee, what is there left to discover about me? What can I grow into? Wow, I might have a speck of an interest about something, and can I live that? It's an unknown thing. Or maybe when we're speaking to someone else, we become awakened by noticing that in our body. And then we like, hey, I want to try that. I want to try painting, or I want to try wrapping crystals or herbs. So the more that we engage with people and interface with people, the size of this box then changes. And we become more aware of ourselves. And it begins to change. So this blind side here, though, I don't know, but is known by others. That's an interesting space, right? Because we don't know what we don't know about ourselves. We only know if people share those things about ourselves. That could be difficult. That could be dangerous, especially in family or community. That could be risky, right? I could have been making Brussels sprouts for years and years and years. And finally, Tom says to me, honey, can I share something with you? And I'm thinking, wow, we're going on a vacation. And I say, sure. And he says, I hate Brussels sprouts. That didn't happen though. Okay, so that's great. I didn't know that, right? Or it could have been you cook Brussels sprouts terribly. Or it could be, did you know that when you eat, you have broccoli all over your mouth? Or it could be, every time you talk to me and you're like in the middle of a conversation, you swap me. I can only do that to him, I'm sorry.
It's true.
Right, I do that, that's why I said it. And so sometimes the feedback loop is, I have a flippin' bruise there. So this little guy right here, this is a mechanism for us to begin to know ourselves. It's a mechanism for us to begin measuring our own risks. And how do we want to take those risks with others? And it becomes a mechanism of, where are my boxes here and how do I get them to change? In fact, if you actually go and Google this, you'll see that there's a lot of different samples. So individuals who are in recovery, their boxes look a lot different because they're going to have a huge hidden area because they lived a life of deception. And so part of their growth edge, part of their coming into recovery, is being able to share more with others, so that what's happening is they're bringing this box and bringing it closer up here. See how little this is right here? And this is where it is there. That's a growth edge. That takes practice, it takes determination, it takes spiritual courage, it takes muscle, it takes determination, and it takes insight. So seeing differences with our hearts or seeing differences with our eyes. That was the experience that I had last time I was here. A mosaic consists of thousands of little stones. Some are blue, some are green, some are yellow, some are gold. When we bring our faces close to the mosaic, we can admire the beauty of each stone. But as we step back from it, we can see that all these little stones reveal to us a beautiful picture, telling a story. None of these stones can tell by itself. So our differences are there to be celebrated. Our personality became wired at some age to be fearful of celebrating those differences for some reason or another. Tom and I were having a conversation about this, and he said kind people struggle with talking about their differences because they're kind. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because I don't see the world that way. When I got here yesterday to set the bowls up, it was before time, and there was a lot of hubbub going on, and I know there had been a lot of hubbub the night before, and I wasn't involved in that for planning yesterday, but I saw a bunch of busy bees, busy doing what they were doing, attending to their individual mosaic piece. Not really talking to anybody about it. There was nobody going around saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. They were just being. They were being in their doing. They were living their strength. They were living the different, unique part that they had to bring here to this church. They were being their individual light. They were being. Now, I need to say this because I found it to be beautiful that as I was thinking about the people who I had seen here yesterday, and I had talked to some of these people earlier in my relationship with them, I knew there had been a longing for community. I had known that there had been a longing for this feeling of family in church. Raise your hands if you can find yourself in that statement. Right. What was brilliant about it was that we were the ones we had been waiting for. When we each showed up in our unique differences and blessed our community with those differences, we built a family. We built safety. We built love. The church, with walls, finally became the church without walls, because they live together. We can't have one without the other. My nature would be, let me figure out where the gap is and try to fill a gap, fill a gap, fill a gap, because I want to see the finished product. And so in my desire to contribute here, I had offered to do a few things. And a friend of mine said to me, oh, it's okay. I think, and I'm naming names, sorry, this is full disclosure. I think that Barbara does a really great job with that. You. Oh, we could hold hands, John, I love you. But it's Barbara. Can you stand up? Yeah. And so I said, that's really true. Barbara does do a really, really great job with that. Now, in my fear brain, I was afraid that maybe she would say no, but you know what? That was her right to say no. And it was her right to celebrate her own individual beautiful light. And so those beautiful, beautiful planters that shimmer with gold and are welcoming to all individuals, they're her work of art. And her thumbs are so green. Right? They're so, I mean, not really, but, and I don't want to embarrass you, but you have done this for Unity since when we were at Lafayette, and you're just a beautiful creator. And so thank you for your contribution of your individual light. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, I didn't divert for that reason. I diverted because the lesson was mine. I didn't have to be the stone of colored green, wherever green is. I could just be my own color stone and create the space of love for all the other stones to show up in their glory. And we each have a part. I could actually go through so many of our names here. So that's this second piece here. That is what our life and community is about. Each of us is like a little stone, but together we reveal the face of God to the world. We are the face of God. Nobody can say, I make God visible, but others who see us together can say they. Community is where humility and glory touch. So just breathe that in. And celebrate your ability to know yourself and where your edges are. Even Jesus knew when he began his journey that he didn't have it all together. He had to go and collect his apostles according to their strengths. Not one of these apostles has the same strength as another. That didn't mean that they all got along together all the time, guys, by the way. They had some heck of a fights. And Mary Magdalene, she was a ringleader. Let's just be straight up, okay? But what we do know is that they each had to show up and offer their gift to the tribe in order to allow the whole to work. This information is taken from the 12 powers of God, just in case you're, or of man, sorry, in case you're wondering. And so Shakti reminds us that our primary relationship is with ourselves, and that all others are mirrors of it. Doesn't that invite a great question? What am I learning from my mirror? What am I learning about myself through the eyes of you? How am I stretching myself? How am I growing myself? How am I being my practical unity person? How am I living with the fears that I have? That you're showing me those fears. I love those questions. Spiritual strength denotes the stability of character and the ability to hold firm to principles of faith in daily life. So we have these things that are called affirmations and denials. We have this belief of God, that God doesn't make junk. We have this belief that we are all children of God, meaning that we were born in the image and likeness, meaning that we are the seed product. But we evolve, we grow, we change. Can we be open to that? Can we be open to the investigation into ourselves that allows us to change? Can we be willing to say, hey, you know, I've had this pattern come up a lot. Every time I see Dana, you know, he says, God, I've got a bruise. At which point am I going to look at myself? Because I keep looking at him saying, why does he always say this to me? Whoops. And I don't think it has anything to do with me because, by the way, I'm perfect. Wait, what? You mean to tell me I might be carrying around a belief, a judgment, or a perception that's creating some kind of a limitation inside of me? Dang. Wait, you're nodding yes. I am. How did you know that about me? Kidding. It's true of all of us, right? And it's this judgment, it's the way we live this life that creates separation, not from the other. I mean, it could be from the other. I could see Dana in Costco and he could be like, oh my God, there's Christine, go down this aisle over here, right? Because he's not willing to say to me, stop doing that, you're hurting me. But if I just take a look at my own self and I say, you know what, I have such a need for connection, I have such a need for joining, that I use swatting him on the arm, as a means for connectivity. Instead, maybe what I really want to be able to do is just make sure we're connected, heart to heart, eye to eye, instead of having to reach out and touch him, right? So what's the key ingredient, though? In order for me to change myself, I have to be willing to forgive myself. Forgive myself for my past transgressions, for my past way of thinking, for my own limitations, for, according to Johari's window, the parts of me I don't even know about myself, because I don't know what I don't know. So can I forgive myself for what I don't know about myself? Can I be willing to empty my cup every single day? These are these spiritual practices that we have. As people of metaphysicians, as truth students, emptying our cup every day through the practice of forgiveness, can we be willing to face our fears and shed our skin? Do you know that when a snake sheds its skin, it does not moan and groan about it? Did you know that? When it's time for the snake to shed its skin, it begins to wriggle and writhe. Look at this one here. This is what the face of the little snake looks like coming at the very beginning. How cool is that? It starts with the head and moves all the way down, wriggling around. And this new skin is fresh and sweet and wet. And it fits the new body. When we look at crabs, the Dungy crab, when it begins to grow out of its shell, it creates a new shell. Otherwise, it would die. What do we do to enlarge in our shells? How do we break free of our own traditions? And how do we create new? So we talked about forgiveness as being one way. But the other way, which I think is really more important, is to remember that we're all doing this together. All of us at the same time. So as much as we have compassion for ourselves and love for ourselves, we need to have love for the other person and compassion for the other person, because they're shedding their skin too. Every time we shower, guys, we have skin cells drop off. Every time we roll around in our sheets, and if you don't change your sheets regularly, I'm sorry, this grosses you out, but your cells are in there. We renew our cellular structure all the time. We do it with our mind structure too. Right? We just have to remember to love ourselves. Any questions or thoughts about that? You guys were really thoughtful, and thank you for letting me present. I know Dana has a rock and roll music now. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to strum. I think his arm might be limp. You got that thing going on there?